So what she was doing was putting audiobooks on for them to put them to sleep. And kind of riding the AI wave and being aware of what's out there, I said, maybe we can create an audiobook in my voice and her voice that therefore the kids will hear us speaking even if we're not there. To have this lifestyle where I have multiple businesses and plus mentoring, plus obviously my family, plus we enjoy traveling a lot. I like exploring and learning a lot. So I don't get everything. I don't get nearly everything I want done, but I get at least a decent amount done because of the fact that I've learned how to, and I've learned what I need to.
The Research Labs podcast by Sunday Pajamas.
How about to get started with, right? You could tell us how was college for you, maybe? Like, what are the subjects you were interested in? Were you like a tech person? Were you a marketing person? Like, what was your perspective at the time, and how did you see the world and your life going forward when you were still in college?
Oh wow. Okay. So Prathamesh, thank you again for having me here today. I'm very excited to be discussing with you. I enjoyed our last conversation, and I'm looking forward to this one as well. My college career, if you can call it that, way back when, I came in very ideological, very much looking forward to making an impact in a field that I thought interested me. So since I was little, I've always been very interested in world happenings. I've been reading the news since I'm 6 years old. And I decided to study political science and international relations. So my goal was always to go towards the field of diplomacy. I wanted to work in the foreign ministry. At the time, I was living in Israel, and I attended the Hebrew University. So I did my first degree in political science and international relations, and during my degree, because I already had a wife and two children, I had to worry about supporting myself a little bit more seriously. So I took a job first in the tourism sector, where I would help incoming tourists arrange meetups with locals for them, and then also various other projects, educational projects, marketing projects, and anything I could do to keep myself very busy. So I did my first degree in political science and international relations, two majors, and then at the same time I also began my second degree in political science. So that's what I was doing. I was doing the marketing, education, and tourism stuff to help pay my bills, and then I was studying what I thought I wanted to work in. At the time, I also took some internships in the field of politics. So I was a writing. I did writing and research in various think tanks. I published very long papers that were published in some prestigious journals that no one ever reads. So I spent many months investing in those. I was involved in a few different campaigns, a few different items. I felt very good about what I was doing until I realized that I really didn't feel like I was having any impact or doing anything meaningful. My second realization was that I felt that I can have more positive impact, not in the political sense, but broader sense in the private sector. And I also was worried financially that it's a little bit difficult to really thrive in the public sector. So I decided to pivot, and from there, I got my first, I would say, like real job in the world of marketing. I moved into a marketing tech company that sold a lot of online courses and a lot of online software, and I took over their support team. From there, I moved up in the company. After about 2 years, I became the COO at the company. For in small companies, titles aren't that important, but we had a decent sized team, and we sold a lot of courses and sales. And then and on the side, I did my own growth marketing consulting too, where I would take a lot of small businesses that were doing well in at least one channel and helping them expand to other channels. So we had, for instance, a very successful Amazon store that he wasn't selling anything directly. We helped him set up a Shopify store. We set up his ads. We helped him make sales. I built a support team for him. And what went from basically taking his one man single channel operation to a de risked larger operation that would allow him to expand, that will allow him to make more money, and that will allow him more freedom as well, where it's not just an entire business on his shoulders. And that business actually exited for quite nicely. So we are proud to take a part in that, and we loved working that client, and we had a few other similar clients as well, um, in some measure. Yeah.
You use the word impact. Like a lot of decisions you took at the time had to do a lot with impact. And you said that it comes from the fact that you started reading about news at a very young age. Do you think it's just that, or do you think there was something maybe in the culture of your family, or maybe the culture of Israel at the time?
It's an excellent question. Yeah, absolutely. My family was the first and primary influence. I was raised in New York. In my household, my parents were involved in doing good within the community and beyond it from morning to night. So that was everything from helping deliver packages to people who needed food, to my father was a volunteer EMS, medical, and he did that as well. We hosted people who, his parents either kicked them out of their home or couldn't live at home for whatever reason. And I grew up in a involved in a place where no matter what I do in my life, I can never measure up to or attain the same level of good that my parents did and that we witnessed growing up. And my older siblings also, they all followed paths where they're until today, whatever their careers are, they all have careers. They're heavily involved in different community elements. For me, I never found my one specific niche, but I was hoping to also somewhat do that through my career. And I wouldn't say I've reached that yet, but there were a few points where I feel like I was having a positive impact in some ways.
So you were raised in New York, and then you mentioned you moved to Israel for your college. Is that what happened?
I went to Israel for a gap year program after high school, and I fell in love with the country and decided to stay. So I moved to Israel. Spent a decade there. Then nearly 2 years ago, moved to Budapest for my wife to attend medical school here. So yeah, this is now I'm living in Hungary now. This is my third country.
And what would you say is like those prominent features from a cultural perspective in all these three countries?
There's still obviously there's positives in every culture, and there's some things that talk less to me in every culture. But in the U.S., somewhat stereotypical, but there's a very strong culture and drive around success, whether that's financial, whether that's status. And until today, a lot of my close friends in the US, that is what drives them in life. And I'm not going to say that doesn't drive me, but that's not, I don't want that to be my primary driver. In Israel, I would say family is probably the most well known. There's a very strong family culture in Israel, which I really appreciate. There's a very strong focus on values, and um, also on really innovation and challenging the system and challenging the norms, and that's something that I really have come to appreciate. And Israel is known for their tech scene, and that didn't happen all by itself. The people, it's a function of how the people are, what they look for, what they promote, and every second person you meet is an entrepreneur. It's just the way things work there. So that was that. And Hungary, I wouldn't say I'm fully embedded in the culture. I mean, I'm here just, under 2 years. I don't speak Hungarian, which is obviously a limitation, but I have started more and more integrating. What I would say is Hungarians are extremely private and extremely respectful. So they like what I found different than in Israel, where everyone's giving you advice and everyone's very loud. And here, people like to give you their space. They're not going to open up to you unless you build a very strong relationship. And it's very different. And I've come to appreciate a lot of that as well. But I still do miss the familiarity and in Israel, you're in a public place, you're in a waiting room for a doctor. You'll always be meeting people. You'll always be learning about people. You'll always be forming connections as part of the culture.
And what about the tech culture or the work culture in I think you started working in Israel and
In
now
Israel, yeah.
you are in Hungary. Yeah.
Exactly.
So what
Yeah.
do you
So
think is the different in the tech culture?
yeah. So in Israel, it's obviously a lot more. It's a lot more formed. It's a lot more intense. It's a lot more dynamic. There's a lot more capital inflows. There's a lot more success stories. It obviously has the reputation, a lot of direct, very strong cooperation with the U.S., both in terms of selling technology, in terms of buying companies, in terms of capital inflows. It's very strongly integrated with Silicon Valley, has a tremendous impact on allowing the system to blossom. And there's also an extreme closeness in the tech community that even though it's huge, but there's still, and no one's more than two steps removed from anywhere in the highest to the lowest in the tech industry. That everyone's connected, which is also I think very unique. Uh, the tech system in Israel has undergone a lot of dynamic changes, where there used to be just a focus on exits. Now there's more of a focus on scaling up and growing in Israel and IPOs. In Hungary, once again, I'm pretty new to the scene. I have been blessed to speak to at a few conferences, run a few workshops, and I'm invited to a few more as well. And the entrepreneurs here are extremely, extremely, extremely bright. they have to work much harder to raise capital. It's not nearly as easy as it is in Israel. And I would say Hungary, because of the political overtones, it's a little bit harder for them to raise from certain investors and stuff like that. Um, and I would say, yeah, I would say that. And the last piece that I found different in terms of the personality, where I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs from both countries and many others as well. In Israel, anytime you speak to someone, you can expect to be challenged. If you say something, they don't like it, they don't understand it, they don't appreciate it, they will challenge you. And in Hungary, and I found people to be much more subtle about it, much more polite. Like they're coming to you as a subject matter expert, and they're going to accept what you say, which is easier. And I appreciate it. I appreciate the appreciation, but I also do like being challenged, and I know to expect. I know to expect conversations to work differently based on who I'm meeting with. But once again, those are general trends. There's exceptions to every rule.
Yeah, yeah. And you let's say you did your college in political science, and then you moved to marketing, and like business and trying to help growth, marketing, all those things, and then now you're trying to build a company of your own. So how does someone go from almost a political career to a marketing career? Like what cues did you pick up? Okay, this is what I need to do. You could do so many other things, literally.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really great question. So the truth is, I didn't fully know what I was getting myself into. I'm someone who enjoys learning about many different subjects, and I experimented in entrepreneurship to an extent when I was very little. When I was 12 years old, my brother-in-law, who had a retail store, and he needed to open a website, someone suggested it. He opened the website, and he didn't know how to drive traffic. So I was 12. He was busy running his store, and he said, Sam, would you help me? And I said, I would love to. So I spent hours upon hours upon hours learning on Google how I can drive traffic for free because I didn't have a budget and he didn't have a budget. So I spent a lot of time. I tried a lot of things that were terrible, a lot of tactics that failed. And eventually, the tactic that I did found that did work was also pretty terrible, but at least we got some traction from it. We got some sales, and I learned through that process. So at that time, I actually thought I made that may be the direction I go, building websites and selling online stores. But the truth is, with time, I learned like I'm not a website builder. I'm not a designer. Those are not my strengths. I can do it on a basic level, but I would never make that my profession. So when I came back to it, 10 whatever it is, 10, 12 years later, after studying in Israel, after the military, I then went and I said, where do I want to go? So I like the world of marketing. I have a certain intuition, a certain understanding of how humans work, and that's very important when you're building any marketing systems. And I really actually wanted to work in the world in the tech world, but I also really enjoyed the world of. Or I thought I would really enjoy the world of customer support because I enjoy working with people. I enjoy helping solve problems, and I feel that there is a place where I could have somewhat of a positive impact. So I worked in a few, very junior positions. And then when I applied for the more senior position, which to be honest, I was very not qualified for, I I reached out to, or I should say, a very close friend of mine. He said to me, Sam, you need to reach out to your network and have people put in good words for you. That's how it works in Israel. And I said, I don't have a network. I didn't have, maybe I had a Facebook. I'm not sure. I had nothing online, no LinkedIn. And he said, "Listen, let me see which company you applied for that gave you an interview." He saw who it was, and he said, "Oh, I have a very high profile contact who is connected to that company. So let me have him put in a good word." So he didn't even know me, and I don't know what he said. He probably just said, "Hey, my friend said that this person, is good, and I trust him." And when I got to the interview, that was the first thing they said to me. They said, "Oh, we heard that Yam mentioned you to us, and to us that's a very positive indicator." So I think that made a very big difference. And once I had the interview, and they gave me some tests, and I passed those, and I was put in a position where I was underqualified, but I had a drive to learn the skills. I had some of the right personality traits to do so, and I was able to thankfully thrive and grow from that position. So it was kind of a combination of what I wanted, luck, and help from friends.
And how long ago was this?
I started there. I was there 4 years, and I left there about 5 or 6 months ago. So yeah, I guess 4.5 years ago, give or take. Yeah,
It's always like this one small thing that just kind of changes everything, no?
absolutely. And you don't always recognize it then. I've pivoted quite drastically since then. Right, I had my growth marketing agency, and that then led to a client who became my partner in my current business, and everything kind of meshed together. Um, Always.
And you left it 5 6 months ago, and were you already in Hungary at the time?
Yeah, I was already in Hungary at the time, and to be honest, that was part of my hesitation because I did have I have my business as well. So I have a business called Design for Decks, where we design pitch decks for high impact investors and high impact startups, and that was a client of mine who was a pitch deck expert, and I eventually we became partners. So that was that, and I had that business, and then it still wasn't enough to nearly compared to what my actual salary was paying, and I was very hesitant to leave my job because I had a very healthy workplace. My colleague, I enjoyed my colleagues. My boss was extremely kind. The salary was where I needed it to be. I had full geographic and time flexibility, so it was really in many ways a dream job. But I also realized that I did want to work on some other projects, and even though it was a little bit harder for me to do, eventually I said, I've been considering this for a year and a half. Like now's the time to finally leave. So I gave them 4 months notice. Actually, I told them in May 2023 I'm leaving the end of August, and they asked me to stay one more month till the end of September, and that was what I did. So I still speak to my old colleagues and boss probably once a week or once every 2 weeks, but I'm now involved in my own ventures as well.
You mentioned that you moved to Hungary because your wife is going to medical school. And did you also mention you have children?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, you do. Yes,
Both of
yes, you
those are
do.
correct.
Two
You're
children.
Two children, yes. I have a daughter who's
Two
nearly
children.
five and a son who's nearly two.
Yeah, I see. So, I point this out because I really want to understand when you are trying to start a company and you also have a family to look after, how does the thought process evolve or change? Like I'm
It's a
sure
really good
if it
question.
like 7 8 years ago when you did not have children, I'm sure it was a different thought process. And how is it
Yes,
different now?
yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I do. When you have children and a family to support, the level of your risk for appetite may decrease based on the fact that you have bills to pay. Thankfully, I'm blessed that because of my business and because investments worked out well for me, and my my things worked out pretty well, that I don't feel that pressure. So I wasn't that wasn't really a concern. But for me, actually, it's a very different change. The change for me is more that I want to only do things that will allow me to put focus on being with my family. And the reason I say that is because a lot of things that I ideally maybe would want to do, and I have a Notion pad full of ideas that I've explored and maybe will return to one day, but they require the founder's lifestyle. I'm a founder, but tech founders and venture backed founders, uh, I have an immense amount of respect for them, but they have to sacrifice a lot to do what they do, and I'm not willing currently to make that sacrifice. So I work with them every day of the week, and I see how much they sacrifice, and I say that's not for me. I need to be there for my family, and all the more so because my wife is in medical school. She isn't very present, during her semesters. So I definitely need to be there for my kids. My kids shouldn't have a situation where they have no present parent. So yeah, it's affected the things that I'm willing to undertake have to be those which I believe will still allow me to prioritize my family and to be there for them quite frequently. Where I can do my work very late at night and during the school day, where I can, whatever I need to do in order to make it happen.
And the one feedback, or I would say a similar experience, which a lot of guests who are working on a startup or also have a job and they have children, they share that uh, having a strong family, right, gives them, I would say, an incentive to start thinking long term instead of taking short term risks which can negatively impact your life. Do you also have do you have similar perspective on it? Like, do you
The
think
truth is that
long term more now?
I've always thought very long term. It's always been my approach. So, but it makes sense to me. Intuitively, it makes sense to me. But I've always been thinking long term since I'm very little. So,
And the startup you're doing right now, Read with Not Love. Do you think it also comes from the fact that you want to be there for the family? And could you also like explain what is the
100%.
startup and how you came up with the
Yes.
idea?
Yeah, so I have a small business called Red with Love. We just launched 2 months ago, and we're getting our first sales, which is really cool. And basically, what we do is, and it's something from my personal experience, where I put my kids to sleep nearly every night, and on the odd time that I'm away on a business trip, and my wife does, so sometimes she's able to, and sometimes she's just very very busy, and she can't give that time. So what she was doing is putting audiobooks on for them to put them to sleep and kind of riding the AI wave and being aware of what's out there. I said maybe you can create an audiobook in my voice and her voice that therefore the kids will hear us speaking even if we're not there. And it's I knew that it wouldn't be the same. You're still missing out the personal experience, but there still is something about familiarity of a child hearing their parents' voice. So I tested this product on a few different children, taking voice of their parents, cloning it into audiobooks, giving it to them and seeing how they reacted. I started with my own children. I went to a few others, and people felt it, enjoyed it, and now I actually launched it. So basically, what we do is we take a voice sample from parents, about 10 minutes. I give them a text to read. They give me a audio. They record it through the system I use, and then I submit it to a program, clone their voice, and every month they get 5 audiobooks, children's audiobooks in that sounds. I would call it in the parent's voice, very close to the parent's voice. It doesn't have the same level of emotion. It's not perfect, but it's good. And they also, and along with that, there's other features that I add to make it slightly more interactive and slightly more engaging, like sound effects. We have read along mode so that kids can identify letters and read the books as well. And we have quizzes that the parents can do with their kids to like help make up for the fact they weren't there. Check the child's reading comprehension. Yeah, so that's my second current business, and it definitely came from that's something that I knew I can build, something that I knew I can systematize, something I knew I can train people for uh, to do a lot of the tasks, which I've done. I have one employee already, and I'm probably bringing the second, hopefully in the next 2-3 months. So everything top to bottom is documented, every single process I do, and based on what the person is doing, I can show them exactly, walk them through it, and then they have all the documentation.
I see. And how are the parents reacting to it?
It's a great question. So I'll be very honest, it's been mixed. So some of the parents really, really enjoy it and they recognize like it is technology and it's not going to be perfect. And other parents they find it difficult that they hear their voice, but it doesn't have the same level of emotion. So what I said is, on one hand, the parents are my customers because they're the ones spending money, but on the flip side, the children are the ones who have to be able to enjoy it and benefit from it. So what I always tell the parents is that you need to show it to your children and see how they react. If they're not happy with it, then it's a problem. And I've done this with my own children, and a lot of parents have done it as well. And anytime a parent had a question and they showed it to their kids, they said their kids sat through the whole stories, they enjoyed it, they identified it as their parents' voice. Even my kids, I say, no, that's not mom's voice. She says, yes, it is. Yes, it is. I said, I can't, that's it. So what I hear as a parent and what a child hears is a little bit different. That being said, I do hope, and I'm actively working to always improve it, that it gets closer and closer to being the actual, sounding closer to how the parent would read to their child.
When you said it's only 2 months old, and so you have a very long journey to go ahead. How are you like figuring out what's next for the company? Like, do you have a system in place? Are you just going with the feedback, or is there a strategy in place? How do you go about it?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So, because it's an idea that's kind of new to the market, I really wanted to validate it quickly, and that's why I'm starting right away with paid campaigns, which I wouldn't usually advise. But I have 3 different types of campaigns going out right now. So one is I have TikTok influencer campaigns, micro influencers, very niche people who deal with parents, mom influencers and the likes, and I have them. I have a second campaign which is starting this coming week, which is going to be TikTok targeted ads. And the third campaign, which I'm starting, is Face of the Brand, where I'm having content produced for my brand to help spread awareness as well. So that's what I'm doing. And the next one will also be, after that will be Facebook. Facebook has obviously the best pixel, the best targeting ability, so I'm going to try that as well. And ultimately, I have a concept board where I have like 70 plus ideas I have for the business, relate to user experience, relate to marketing, relate to product development, relate to partnerships. And every week or so, I look at my board and I decide what am I going to move forward this week. So I move it forward to prioritize, I research it, start trying to push it forward. And some of them work, some of them don't work, and that's what I'm always doing. Ultimately, I'm also aware like there are certain changes that are going to very much change my business model. For instance, certain technologies that are coming out. Microsoft has demoed a product called Valley, VALLE, which can basically clone a person's voice on a sample of less than 5 seconds. So once that actually is released to the public, I'll no longer need a 10-minute sample. I can probably get away with. They say 5 seconds. I'll probably want a little longer just to slightly improve the quality. Um, and I'll have to change my entire workflow. But that to me is only an advantage to make the process easier for my users. It can also bring down the cost of what I have to charge and a few other things as well. So yeah, I have plans, I have ideas, but it's very much also keeping a finger on the pulse, understand what the customers are enjoying, what they're asking for, what the market's allowing, what channels are working on less so, and what technology is coming out, and how that'll change what I'm doing.
And you mentioned that since it's the very beginning, you are not trying to automate anything. You just want to keep doing things manually until you get to a point where you are sure. Could you share a little bit as to why you are doing it? And did you learn this by making mistakes, or you just like how did you come up with this idea to not automate?
I the not automating is because I'm kind of taking 4 or 5 different processes that are not currently directly integrated and putting them together. So ideally, I would want. I am automating a big part of the process, but not the core of the process. Taking the voice, applying it to the books, and the reason for that is threefold. First of all, they don't integrate yet. Second of all, I don't want to. If I invest too much in integration, I'm embedding myself, into a certain system, entrenching myself. When I know that I'm going to switch some of those pieces out, when I know that certain technologies come out, I'm going to have to switch those in, and it's going to change my entire workflow. And the third one is that when you do things manually and you build processes around them, you get a really good handle for, hey, maybe something should be done a little differently. Hey, there's something I can improve, and that'll affect the end process as well. So once my process is more stable, once I have a clear direction, then at that point I likely will, yeah, integrate, automate as much as I possibly can.
And I'm only asking this, right, because you mentioned that you also mentor a lot of entrepreneurs. Have you also come to realize that a lot of people don't understand that in the beginning, going manual is a better idea than trying to build everything out and spending time on more important things like actually validating the idea and getting the customer than to just keep on building the product? Is that something that you?
No, yeah, thank you. It's a clear question. So, in my mentoring, I would kind of divide that into two of my formal mentoring and my informal. My formal mentoring, I stick to very specific subjects that I believe I have a lot to offer. So, when it comes to product development, product market fit, items like those, I refer them to other people. I say, I don't, I can discuss with you a little bit because of my experience, but I don't consider myself an expert. So, I won't do that. I specifically mentor around pitch decks, around online course development, around marketing frameworks, and I won't touch most other things. Informal mentoring is like when I have other entrepreneurs call me up, and anyone who asks me for a call, I always say yes. I'm always happy to try and help where I can. And there I'll touch on something, but I'll usually also say here, my opinion is X, Y, and Z. But I also suggest, developing the idea a little more and speaking to a real expert. So, generally speaking, that is advice I have given, but that's not advice that I wouldn't call that part of my formal mentoring.
Then how did you understand that this is a way to go for your startup, for example?
Part of it's intuition, part of it's experience, and part of it is that I also meet with experts. So I have a group of people who I believe to have like a pretty wide range of expertise, and them I speak to often about ideas that I want to push forward. And then through programs that I mentor, and I'll reach out to other mentors in specific areas and book calls with them and spend 30 minutes on the phone with them and get their advice. So it was a combination of the three.
Because it's not obvious at all.
Right.
Does
It's
it
not
make
obvious.
sense?
And,
Like,
and, and,
yeah, if you're
and
doing it for the first, it's not obvious. Yeah.
I would agree. I agree it's not obvious. I do think it's the right approach. It could be some people would feel differently.
I have been reading a lot about in the media, I would say, about the fatherhood crisis in the culture because, like, I read a lot about how a lot of children are growing up in the world with in single parent families, and that is creating a lot of mental health issues. Do you think about that a lot? Have you been reading on that? And I'm only asking this because your product kind of aligns in that area. I'm not sure how much, but I think even last time we had a conversation, we kind of touched upon what are the overarching secondary, I would say, results of the product you are building. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think first of all, I appreciate the suggestion. I never thought about that, but maybe that is something to think about from a framing perspective. One or even two of my influencers did tie it into that to an extent. One to the mental health of the child, where they're basically your parent isn't there. Let's give them more of experience that will help them feel more comforted and less anxiety. And a second one, we tied it into the mental health of the parent, where when you're sitting with a child at the end of the day and you're a single parent or you're a very busy parent, you don't always have the energy to do what you need to. At least this way you can sit with your child and give them something that you feel proud to give them. So I didn't think of it that way, and it's not an area that I'm you know particularly knowledgeable about. But if it helps and that's another benefit or outcome, by all means, and maybe it's something that I would later integrate into my marketing messaging.
Hmm. Do you think it's a? I'm just throwing questions that are coming to my mind because mental health crisis is something which is, I would say, not a good trend, not a good trend to increase in the future, but we are kind of seeing it everywhere, and a lot of it has to do with parenting. Fortunately, unfortunately, I'm not quite sure. Do you think it's a good idea for a company like yours, which is very targeted in the parenting sector, to maybe talk to researchers who are mental health experts and maybe do trials which can empirically measure what impact your product has on the mental health of the consumers, children and parents both?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent suggestion, but I think that's like step 522. I need to have, I first need to make sure that people are enjoying it, enough people. I need to make sure that the market's taking to it. I need to make sure it's a viable long-term business model, which I'm validating all those right now. And once I'm at that point, then it starts thinking about, can I test this clinically? I haven't thought that far ahead, but I think it's a good suggestion.
Do you think there is already like research material available which is already proven it and we just don't know
There's
about it yet?
there's research. I've read through a lot of the research about children reading, parents reading to their children, about the importance of exposing your child to books at a much younger age. Those all exist. Obviously, there's research on spending time with your kids. This specific product or something very similar to this, I did not find any research. There are research also from audiobook companies in terms of benefits of audiobooks and how they teach kids how to active listen, reading comprehension, and a lot of other tools it could give them, which are things that I do mention, but not to the same level of a personalized audiobook. There isn't research on that yet, to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah, because I think personalized audiobooks is like a very new category. Like there is nothing like it still in the market.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's my impression as well.
When you are, let's say, coming up with ideas, right? What kind of ideas do you usually come up with respect to this particular startup? Are this more of like growth ideas, product ideas, and do you also maybe think about?
Everything. Any idea I have goes on my concept board. My concept board is low friction. There is no anything I think of goes on that board. So that can be a company I saw that I think would be interesting to partner with. That could be an influencer that I think could be good for the product. That could be a new marketing channel I haven't thought of. That could be how to improve the user experience. That can improve how an additional product I can sell. Everything goes on that board, and I tag them as well. I have tags: user experience, product, marketing, partnerships. I have a lot of tags, and and that way I can quickly decide what it is I want to look at and decide what I want to push forward. So I have like a 4-stage table that I got from a friend of mine who's a growth marketing expert, and that's it. It's very simple: concept, any idea you have, prioritize something that you want to then research more and see how to actually put it into play. Launches, once I actually determine how to do it, what I'm going to do, I actually launch it. And the fourth column is track, which is once I launched it, what's the outcome? Did this improve the experience? Did it decrease it? Did this bring in more sales? Did it not? And then from track, you decide, does it go back? Do I launch a second experiment? Do I double down on it? Do I scrap it? So yeah, that's I use this framework for all my businesses. The two I currently have, a third one I'm exploring as well, and that's how I like to keep things moving forward and
This
organized.
already sounds like so much work to me. And by work, I mean there's a lot of things to think about, a lot of information to digest, a lot of information to, organize on this system that you mentioned, right? And then you have a family to spend time with, and very young children that demands a lot of attention. How do you think you organize all of it in your head, not on a board? Like, how do you make sense of it all on a very weekly basis?
Yeah, so I do it on a calendar. I do it on a board because that's the way you have to do it. I have to know what time of my day is being dedicated to what, and there obviously has to be some flexibility. A child is homesick, an opportunity comes up that you can't say no to. But overall speaking, everything is given time, and everything is given place, and everything is given focus, because that's the only way to do it. So my kids are in school every day, 8:30 to 4. Like those are my prime hours. They go to bed around 8 to 11 p.m. Those are my other prime hours, and then everything else as it fits.
I see. And how long do you think it took you to kind of, nail this system that you have at the moment?
I haven't nailed it. I've always been quite organized. I've always been able to balance a few things at a time, but it can always be improved. So like I have a good system, and I'm always thinking about ways to improve it and thinking about how I can, make sure that my focus is better. Maybe I have to take some of the blocks that I built and put more of them together, or maybe I put too much at a time, and a 2 hour block is too much, and I want to separate them. So I'm constantly optimizing, constantly adjusting based on myself, based on the opportunities, based on what requires what. But I haven't nailed it. I have it better, I better than I would say most people, even most entrepreneurs. But there's always room to optimize it.
And then how does downtime look like? Like how do you make sure that, that there is you're resting enough?
That I'm resting enough, or that, or you're asking, meaning, what is my, how do I spend my downtime? You're asking, how do I make sure I have downtime? Like, what? I didn't understand the question.
Yeah, in the sense, let's say when you decide to take a break, how, like, a lot of times when you put all these things in motion, let's say you're talking to clients, you have a team member who is working all the time for you, who have questions that you need to answer. When so many things are in momentum, right? It's difficult. You can decide, I will take a break, but they don't let you take a break. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, as much as possible, I try not to let, like, unless something's pre-scheduled, I don't let asynchronous communications get in the way, right? Even now, we're on a meeting, we're discussing, we're having a conversation, and I'm sure you heard before, like I'm getting messages on Slack. I thought I had them on mute. I apologize for that. Anyways, they're there. I don't know. There's nothing that needs my attention this minute, right? I'll After our call, I'll look at the different my different Slack instances and see which one I feel should be tackled first. What am I going to look at first? I'm sure I have emails coming in. I'm sure I have LinkedIn messages coming in. This is just the nature of life. So you just can't be worried about what are people doing, which of my employees on where, what's he or she doing right now. When the time is right for it, I'll give it that focus, and I'll give it my full, absolute, undivided attention and focus. But that's not right now, so I'm not going to worry about it right now.
I'm getting a sense that you have very strong priorities in place, and you also have like a good enough system to make sure they happen on time. It's very, I would say, yeah, it's very fascinating to me.
I try. I mean, nothing. Once again, nothing's perfect, and things fall through the cracks. But on average, that's kind of what allows me to have this lifestyle where I have, multiple businesses, and plus mentoring, plus obviously my family, plus we enjoy traveling a lot. I like exploring and learning a lot. So I don't get everything. I don't get nearly everything I want done, but I get at least a decent amount done because of the fact that I've learned how to, and I've learned what I need to. So yeah, it's a big help.
Where do you think the drive comes from? You are doing everything you're doing, but you also make sure you want to mentor startups that you want to mentor. You don't need to do it, but you still do it. So where do you think it comes from? Does it come from as you mentioned, from the family you were raised in? Because even they were
Yeah,
very active.
it's I actually don't know the answer fully myself, but I believe to an extent it's going to be part of it's going to be from the family. The fact that that's what my parents did. I remember my father always meeting with people and helping them, giving them advice about their business and life, personal life, or whatever they needed. Part of it is because I feel like I would like to have more of a positive impact, and my businesses, my first focus generally is going to be, obviously taking care of my employees and my clients, but also my bottom line. And this way, when I'm doing things like mentoring, that's not my focus. Most people I mentor will never become clients of mine. And the last piece is kind of karma and giving back, and it's all connected. Like people give to me, I give back, and what goes around comes around, and I truly believe in that. So I and I'm sorry, and what I should also mention, maybe even first, is I enjoy it. I enjoy doing mentoring, so I include it in my days also because I enjoy it. So even now, like I live in Central Europe, I speak at conferences here, I mentor founders here, and serves my business serves a specific audience, the U.S. audience. So the people I'm working with here on the exact same subject as what I do are almost never going to be a fit for my business, and I actually enjoy that to an extent because then I go into with the conversations, I go into the meetings, into the presentations with the framework of, hey, I'm doing this just to help, and I don't have to. I'm not thinking about how something's going to be received and how that'll impact any bottom lines because it's two totally different buckets.
I see. And it kind of worked out that way. You did not kind of
Yeah,
design
I
it.
didn't. I didn't plan for it. If I had a choice, I would have planned it differently. I would have said, "Hey, I'd rather be speaking always to people who can be clients of mine because I need to be growing my businesses." But it didn't work out that way. And in retrospect, I'm thankful for that.
So let's say after your wife completes medical school, would you be moving again, or have you guys decided
I
to be
believe,
in Hungary
yeah,
after that?
the intention is to move back to Israel.
Got it. Why Israel? Any particular reason?
As I said, I feel a very strong connection to Israel. I mean, I'm Jewish as well, but I feel a very strong connection to Israel as a place where I would like to be, as a place where our grandparents and great grandparents yearned to go to, always wanted, prayed to be also go to Israel. I feel a strong connection to Israel in terms of the culture and the family and the innovation, and I want to raise my children there for that reason. And beyond that, there's a certain sense of pride where a lot of a lot of my grandparents, my great grandparents, almost every generation of mine was persecuted at some point in some country in the world, and we now have a country that is, in a sense, standing up for not everyone, but standing up for a lot of our people. That's a refuge. It's not a perfect country by any stretch, but it is a country that does a lot of good, a country that takes care of our own. And to me, that's a big sense of pride, a big sense of joy, and a big sense of luck that I'm able to do what my grandparents and great grandparents couldn't do.
I see. Could you give me like a sense of what the culture is like in Israel? I have no clue. I mean, and the idea I have is very little to paint a picture for myself.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to summarize a country of 9 million citizens that's multi-ethnic and multiple religions, right? Even though it's the Jewish state, it's only 75% Jewish, right? So there's a very strong there's a lot else going on. There's obviously the geopolitical elements as well. You have a big a lot, almost a lot of people who move from all over the world, from Middle Eastern countries, from Arab countries, from Iran, from the U.S. It's a big melting pot. So it's a lot of the cultural elements are very much dynamic and dependent on who you're with, how many years they've been there, what city you're in. Overall, though, I'd say as a whole, there's a very strong sense of unity, even with very strong political and personal debates. There's a very, very strong sense of unity and coming together, especially when there's tragedies on a level that's incredible. There's a very strong culture of entrepreneurship and innovation, which also I haven't seen rivaled anywhere else, but I also haven't been everywhere. And family is key. Everyone spends every weekend with family, extended family. It doesn't matter what you are, what part of society. That's just part of it. And I would say that, yeah, the last piece I said also, where there's a lot of openness to strangers and to new people. You're in the street, you're in an office, people are always talking to you, people are always engaging you in conversation, sometimes not nice things. They could be yelling at you for doing something wrong. They could be, or as a parent, I get parenting advice from strangers in Israel all the time. Your kid's not warm enough, you need to bundle her up more. And it's something it's something that's so unusual in many places, like mind your own business, or like who are you to say something, but there it's actually part of the culture. and
Yeah,
and I appreciate it, I enjoy it, sense of
it's
community,
welcomed
sense of
in
family.
Israel.
Yeah, yeah, it's very, very, very intense, and you would feel it as a tourist. Like there's some places where to really understand the place, you need to be a local, and that's true in Israel as well. But as a tourist, you would feel those elements. Like people will talk to you. You'll talk to someone. They're not gonna. You ask someone for directions or ask someone a question. Nine out of 10 people will talk to you and engage you in conversation and ask you questions about where you're from and ask you about your political views. And it's a really common part of the society that some people find offensive, but I actually enjoy a lot.
The tiny bit of connection I personally have with Israel is that when we were in school, I joined a martial arts class, and we were learning a Japanese style of martial arts called Goju-ryu. Then we learned that for like 3 years, and then for 1 full year we were taught jiu-jitsu, aikijutsu, and then we were also taught this style of martial arts called Krav Maga, which was actually developed by the Israeli army.
Yes, yes, yes. I served in the military. I served in combat, so we studied a lot of Krav Maga. That's definitely true.
I have this memory where the instructor came in and they asked all of us to like stand in line, and he was very serious and he was trying to explain us the importance of Krav Maga and how powerful the techniques are, right? And he was like, let me give you an example. And he asked one of the guys to stand in front of him and shake his hand. And I'm not sure what happened after that, but the guy who came in knelt down because he was in so much pain with just the handshake. And
Eh,
then we were taught the handshake as to what points you can press on the hand to uh, to create that kind of painful experience, so that the person who's in front of you, if he has a gun in his hand, he can just get rid of it and you can kind of defend yourself. And we were just kids and we were blown away by this. I was like, whoa, that is powerful, man.
yeah, yeah. No, that's well. Thank you for sharing. It's definitely it's a pretty cool story.
When you say you served in the military, right? How was that experience like?
The military is the military, so it's pretty hard. Um, Everyone in Israel is obligated to serve, all adults, so both men and women. Um, there's a huge diversity in terms of roles available. So the military is not just combat. Only about 1 in 10 soldiers serve in combat. You have everything from social workers to doctors to athletic instructors to secretaries to cooks, drivers, and everything in between. So I was a tank commander. I served in tanks, and then after that, I moved to what's called armored infantry, and I was a platoon sergeant. So it was a combat unit, and because of that, there's a lot of intensity. So the experience was amazing in many ways, very difficult in many ways. Nothing you could really anticipate or explain, but there's different stations. So, like the first 3 months, all you're doing the first 3 months is learning to be a soldier, learning to take orders, and learning to be disciplined. You're not learning any real skills beyond that. So it's keeping you busy morning to night. It's every single thing you want to do. You need permission from your commander. You want to go to use the bathroom. You don't have your phone. They bring you out to the field for weeks at a time where you don't shower, you don't have a phone, and you're living in a tent and whatever else. It's dealing with the elements and learning the basics of gun shooting and Krav Maga and stuff like that. But 90% of it's just learning to be a soldier. And then the next stage is going to be your advanced training, where you're actually gaining specific skills. You're building up your strength more. So that can be whether you have a specific use in the army or a sniper or whatever the various options are. There's a lot of them. And then after that you go operational. So that can be anything from manning checkpoints and checking people for weapons to going out and doing arrests to going to riots and dealing with riots, and sometimes more boring stuff as well, plenty of more boring stuff too, and then in times of war as well. So it's dynamic, it changes, and then you move around a lot to kind of keep things fresh. You're always undergoing training as well, and the average, yeah, right now you have to serve, I believe it's 2 years and 8 months if you're a male, and I believe 2 years if you're female. I think those are the numbers today.
And how would you describe the culture in the military? I mean, it's the perception of every military is that a lot of discipline, a lot of hard work, and a lot of not showering. But could you like share a little bit more as to
A lot
what
of
are those,
discipline, a lot of hard work, a lot of that's for sure. A lot of time wasting as well. That's the part they don't tell you about, where there's just like so many bureaucratic and other tasks you deal with. and just like simple things like the bus is supposed to take you to your next deployment and it just doesn't show up for 6 hours, so you're waiting 6 hours and just until it shows up. There's that too, and it changes. There are times when you're very active, when especially during more tense times where you're dealing with a lot of arrests and a lot of keeping areas safe. And there are times when it's just quiet. You're doing patrols, and thankfully nothing happens. Quiet is good, and you're a soldier of the army. Whatever they need, that's what you do. So it can be hard work, or it can be boring work, or it can be something in between, or it can be both. All of the above. It really depends on the day and on your position and on the time that you served and what happened that day and so on and so forth. Um, and I would say what I would say is unique about it is that it works as a sort of way to connect different elements of society. So, because most of us we grew up in a neighborhood, we know our people from our neighborhood, we know our people from our social class, we know people from where we live in the army. Everyone serves together, and everyone's an equal. So, you go and serve in a unit, and you're religious. You're serving with secular people. You're from a whatever background, you're serving someone from a different background and from different parts of the country, and it's a very good opportunity to really meet and learn about other people, and come even close to people who you would never in your life think of being friends with. And I saw a lot of that. I experienced a lot of that, and I'm very grateful that I had that opportunity.
And how do you think this changes the perspective, not just of an individual, right, but of the overall society when everyone serves?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think my perception is that because even though there's Israelis have very strong opinions, and there's a lot of very polarizing and very difficult conversations that are had in Israel around politics, around religion, around war. Even though there's very strong differing opinions, for the most part, I would say it's very different than, let's say, in the U.S., where I've experienced where there's like a hostility between the two people. So here it's we strongly disagree. I may be angry about what you're doing, but it's much easier to actually be friends outside of that conversation. And that's totally normal. And it's something we joke about. Officially, you're not supposed to discuss politics in the army, but when you're with people day in, day out, you discuss politics, you get in heated debates. And that's why you have in every unit, you have friends from all across the spectrum.
Would you say it kind of makes everyone more, what is the understanding of everyone?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Meaning people will still strongly disagree. It doesn't. Not everyone's going to change their view. If you came to strong right wing views, you may stay that way. Left, you may stay that way. There is room, more because you're confronting other things. You have more opportunity to change, but you always will have a pretty strong understanding of the other side. It's not going to be just a matter of they're crazy or they're idiots. Like they have an opinion. I strongly disagree with it, but I understand it. 100%. It creates more understanding.
How would you say your perspective changed before and after the experience?
So I went in as a newcomer. I was new to the land. I was living there. I was a year and a half in a gap year program before I joined. I did it before the army. I volunteered a few months in the hospital, so I had some exposure to, a little bit deeper things. But I wasn't going in for that. I didn't have that in mind. I didn't anticipate how it would change it. But I could say that until today, that my closest friends in Israel span the religious spectrum, they span the cultural spectrum, they span the socioeconomic spectrum, and that's just reality, and it's not going to change. Like these are people who, right, brothers in arms, but people who helped me a lot and who I would rely on with my life and who I have great appreciation for.
Do you think a lot of discipline you have right now also kind of comes from the military?
Yeah, it would be hard for me not to credit them. I think I had a pretty strong sense of discipline beforehand, but the discipline you learn and experience in the military is definitely much more significant than anything else. So yeah, I think it's played a significant part in that.
And your parents are still in the US right now, or they also moved to Israel?
Yes, yes. My family, my mother and my siblings all live in the U.S. My father passed away a long time ago, but yeah, everyone's still in the U.S. My family, my wife's family, they're all still there.
Well, Sam, this was wonderful.
Thank you so much, Pramash. I really appreciate it. Thank you, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.